The night had settled over New York City, wrapping the skyline in a blanket of shimmering lights. Skyscrapers glowed against the deep blue sky, taxis honked impatiently, and the chatter of strangers blended into the restless hum of the city that never slept. In the middle of this chaos, weaving between cars and puddles on a cracked old bicycle, was a young delivery boy named Ethan Parker. His jacket was too thin for the biting wind, the zipper half broken, and his sneakers, once white, were now scuffed and barely holding together. Strapped to his back was a bright red insulated food bag, the kind that screamed "delivery" from a mile away. To most people, Ethan was just another nameless kid hustling through the streets. But if anyone looked closer, they would have seen something rare. They would have seen his smile. Ethan smiled at strangers in cars when they cut him off. He smiled at pedestrians who nearly bumped into him. He even smiled when the cold stung his face, making his eyes water. It wasn't a fake grin. It was the kind of smile that seemed to carry warmth, as if he carried a secret hope that things, somehow, would get better. Life hadn't been kind to him. His father had walked out years ago, leaving Ethan's mom to raise two kids alone. His mother now worked long hours at a diner despite her worsening health, and his little sister Lily, just 13, dreamed of one day becoming a doctor. Ethan took the weight of all their struggles quietly. He worked long shifts delivering food across Manhattan, sometimes skipping meals just so he could hand the extra cash to his mom at the end of the week. Yet no matter how tired his legs felt, no matter how heavy his chest became with worries, Ethan never stopped smiling. He had learned something powerful from his mother. Sometimes a smile is the only light you can carry when the world feels dark. What Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that tonight, his ordinary delivery run, his simple smile, would collide with someone else's darkest moment. And without saying a single word, he was about to save a life. Just a few blocks away from where Ethan pedaled through the night, in a quiet corner of the city, sat a woman named Olivia Hayes. From the outside, her life looked picture perfect. She had a corporate job, a nice apartment overlooking Central Park, and a smile that, at least in photos, made her look like she had everything under control. But behind those locked doors, Olivia's world was collapsing. Her living room was dimly lit, curtains drawn tight, the TV on mute, with a news channel flickering images she wasn't even watching. On the coffee table sat an untouched takeout box from lunch, and beside it, a bottle of prescription pills. She stared at them with tired, hollow eyes, her hands trembling as she pressed them together, as if in a silent prayer she no longer believed in. Olivia had once been full of life. She was the kind of woman who stayed after work to help colleagues, who always remembered birthdays, who sent her mom flowers every Mother's Day. But in the past year, everything had crumbled. Her father's sudden death, a painful breakup that shattered her heart, and the constant weight of loneliness pressing down on her. Each day felt heavier, and tonight felt unbearable. She whispered into the empty room, her voice cracking, "What's the point anymore? No one would even notice if I wasn't here." Her phone buzzed with a notification, a work email. She didn't even bother opening it. In that moment, the world felt cold, indifferent, and silent. She picked up the bottle of pills, her fingers brushing against the label, her pulse quickening with fear and despair. Tears blurred her vision. She felt trapped inside her own mind, drowning, with no hand reaching out to pull her back. And that's when it happened. A small knock, 3 short taps at the door. She froze. Who could it be at this hour? Slowly, she got up, wiping her tears, hiding the bottle behind a cushion. She opened the door to find a delivery boy, his red bag slung over his shoulders, breathing heavy from pedaling through the night. It was Ethan. And before she could say a word, before she could even sign for the order, he looked up at her, exhausted, windburned, but smiling. That same warm, disarming smile he carried everywhere he went. Something inside Olivia shifted. For the first time in weeks, she felt the tiniest spark of warmth break through her darkness. She didn't know why, but that smile, it felt like a reminder that life, in all its chaos, still had moments of unexpected kindness. She didn't realize it yet, but that knock, that smile, had just interrupted her plan and saved her life. Olivia stood frozen in the doorway, her hand still gripping the frame as if it were the only thing holding her up. Ethan shifted slightly, catching his breath from the ride, and held out the paper bag with her order. "Evening, ma'am. Hope your night gets better," he said, his voice warm but casual, like he said it to everyone. Yet to Olivia, it didn't sound like just a routine line. She looked at him, really looked. His helmet was crooked, his knuckles scraped from gripping the handlebars too tightly, and his jacket was thin against the cold. But despite all of it, there it was. That smile. It wasn't forced or practiced. It wasn't the kind people use in photos. It was genuine. It was the kind that carried light even in the middle of a storm. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but no words came out. Instead, Her eyes watered again, this time not from despair, but from something she couldn't name. Gratitude, relief, the faintest reminder that humanity still existed. She didn't know. Ethan noticed her silence, and sensing something unusual, gave her a small nod. "Take care, all right?" he added softly before stepping back toward his bike. Olivia clutched the bag, but her mind wasn't on the food. It was on him, on that tiny, fleeting moment of warmth he'd carried to her doorstep. She closed the door slowly and leaned her back against it, her chest rising and falling as if she had just surfaced from underwater. She looked over at the coffee table. The pill bottle still sat there, waiting like a shadow of her pain. Just minutes ago, it had felt like the only path left, but now she couldn't move toward it. Something inside her whispered, "Not yet. Wait, maybe tomorrow." For the first time in weeks, she set the bottle aside. She didn't throw it away, but she pushed it far back into a drawer, as if hiding it could also hide the thoughts that haunted her. Then she sat down, opened the takeout bag, and took a bite. It wasn't about the food, it was about breathing again, about reminding herself that life still had flavors, textures, moments. Meanwhile, Ethan was already back on his bike, pushing through the cold night, unaware of the invisible battle he had just interrupted. To him, it was just another delivery, just another smile. But to Olivia, it was something far bigger. It was hope. That night, as she lay in bed, Olivia found herself replaying the delivery boy's face over and over in her mind. She wondered why a stranger's smile felt more healing than the dozens of texts and calls she had ignored from coworkers, or the motivational quotes she had scrolled past online. Maybe because it was real. Maybe because it came at the exact moment she needed it. And though she didn't know it yet, that single smile had quietly planted the seed of change. While Olivia finally drifted off to sleep that night, with the faint echo of a stranger's smile in her mind, Ethan was racing down empty streets on his old bike, the cold wind biting at his face. Most people thought delivery boys had it easy. Just drop food and leave. But for Ethan, every ride was a battle against exhaustion, bills, and the weight of responsibility on shoulders far too young. He parked outside his small apartment, where the flickering hallway light buzzed like a broken heartbeat. As he pushed the door open, he was greeted not by silence, but by the sound of soft coughing. His younger sister, Emily, lay curled up on the couch under a blanket, her textbooks scattered around her. She was only 14, but ever since their parents passed away in a car accident 2 years ago, Ethan had become both brother and parent overnight. "Hey, you should be in bed," Ethan whispered, dropping his delivery bag on the floor. Emily gave him a weak smile, her face pale from the fever. "I was waiting for you," she said softly. Ethan sat down beside her, brushing her hair back. "I told you, don't wait up. You need rest." But she shook her head. I don't like being alone." That broke him a little inside. He had spent the whole night smiling for strangers, carrying bags of food into warm homes, wishing he could give Emily that same comfort. Instead, all he had was a drafty apartment, a pile of unpaid bills, and the promise to himself that he would never let her down. He heated up some leftover soup, watched her eat a few bites, and then tucked her in with the same gentleness their mother used to show. As he sat by her side, exhaustion pressed heavily against his eyelids, but his mind replayed the faces of all the people he had delivered to that night. Most of them barely looked at him. Some complained about late food, others handed tips without making eye contact. But then he thought about Olivia, the woman at the door who hadn't said a word, yet whose eyes told a story. There had been something in her silence, something fragile. Ethan couldn't explain why, but he hoped she was okay. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her pain, but for some reason, her face lingered in his memory more than the others. Lying on the couch across from Emily, with a thin blanket barely covering him, Ethan whispered into the darkness, "Just a little longer. I can do this. I have to." And as the city outside slept, two souls who didn't know each other, Olivia and Ethan, lay in different worlds, both clinging to the faintest thread of hope. Little did they know, their lives had just become intertwined in ways neither could imagine. The next morning, Olivia sat by her window, watching the golden rays of sunrise spill across the quiet suburban street. She hadn't noticed a sunrise in months. Most days, she drew the curtains and let the world remain outside, too heavy to face. But today felt slightly different, lighter, though she couldn't explain why. As she wrapped her hands around a mug of coffee, her mind drifted back to last night. That delivery boy's smile, it had been so simple, so ordinary, and yet in that moment it had been the first real warmth she had felt in a very long time. It wasn't pity, it wasn't forced, it was just human. She whispered to herself, why did that matter so much? Her voice cracked, surprising even her. Her daughter's photograph sat on the small table beside her, the glass frame covered in a thin layer of dust. Olivia reached out, and carefully wiped it clean. It had been months since she touched it, months since she allowed herself to really look at the face that once brought her all the joy in the world. But this morning, she traced her finger along her daughter's smiling cheeks, remembering laughter instead of loss. For the first time, she didn't feel crushed by the weight of memory. Instead, she felt a strange gratitude for that brief reminder that kindness still existed in the world, even in the form of a stranger on a doorstep. Later that day, Olivia stepped outside. It was just to check the mail, something so ordinary, but her neighbors almost gasped when they saw her. She hadn't been out in weeks. The fresh air stung her lungs, but it also filled her with something she hadn't felt in so long: life. On the way back in, she caught her reflection in the glass door. She looked older, tired, and broken, but she also saw a glimmer in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She didn't know if she would ever fully heal, but maybe, just maybe, she could try. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the houses, Olivia sat with her journal. For the first time in over a year, she picked up her pen and wrote, "Someone smiled at me last night. It saved me." She paused, staring at the words, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't the heavy tears of grief. They were softer, tears of release, tears that whispered, "You're still here. You're still alive." She closed the journal, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." Ethan's alarm buzzed at 6 a.m., rattling on the cracked nightstand in his small apartment. He groaned, rubbing his eyes, and looked around the one-bedroom space he shared with his younger brother. The paint was peeling, the rent was overdue, and the fridge was nearly empty. Life wasn't easy for him, but he never let it show when he stepped out the door. At just 20 years old, Ethan carried more responsibility than most. His father had walked out years ago, and his mom worked double shifts at a diner. Ethan had dropped out of college to help pay bills, delivering takeout for long hours, day after day. Some of his friends teased him, saying he was just a delivery guy, but Ethan never complained. Deep down, he believed that even small jobs mattered if you did them with heart. As he threw on his delivery jacket and grabbed his phone, Ethan remembered the woman from last night. He couldn't recall her name. Customers came and went, but something about her stuck with him. The way her eyes looked empty, like she was carrying a weight too heavy to describe. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now he couldn't shake the memory. He wondered, did my smile even matter to her? Probably not, he thought with a shrug. To him, it was just instinct, but little did he know that smile had been the first spark of hope for a grieving mother. Later that morning, Ethan rode his old bike through the chilly streets, delivering bags of food. The wind stung his face, his legs ached from pedaling, but he forced a smile every time he rang a doorbell. Why? Because he believed, maybe without realizing it, that kindness didn't cost a thing. At one stop, a little boy opened the door, his face lighting up as Ethan handed him a pizza box. The boy said, "Thanks, mister," before running back inside. Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. Moments like that reminded him why he tried to treat everyone with warmth. He didn't have money, status, or power, but he did have a smile. That evening, as he sat down to a simple meal of noodles with his brother, Ethan felt the exhaustion of the day settling into his bones. Still, when his brother asked how was work, Ethan just grinned and said, "Not bad. I made a few people smile." What he didn't know was that miles away, Olivia was sitting by her journal, holding on to that very same smile like it was a lifeline. The next morning, Olivia woke up to the sound of birds outside her window. For weeks, she had dreaded mornings. Each sunrise felt like a cruel reminder that life was moving on without her husband. But today, something felt slightly different. She couldn't explain why, but there was a faint warmth in her chest, a leftover piece of that delivery boy's smile. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the dusty photo frames on her nightstand. Pictures of her late husband holding their daughter, their family vacations, birthday parties, all memories frozen in time. Tears welled in her eyes, but instead of letting them drown her, she whispered, "I need to try." For the first time in months, Olivia brushed her hair, put on jeans and a sweater, and walked outside. The crisp morning air filled her lungs. She felt nervous, almost as if the world had changed while she had been hiding. But every step down the street was an act of courage. She wandered into a small local coffee shop, the kind she and her husband used to visit on lazy Sunday mornings. The smell of roasted beans wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. Olivia ordered a latte, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her wallet. When the barista handed her the cup with a smile and said, "Have a beautiful day," Olivia felt tears sting her eyes again. This time, not from grief, but from realizing how much even the smallest kindness could mean. She sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching people rush by outside. Parents walking their kids to school, couples laughing, joggers with their dogs. It was life, ordinary and beautiful. And in that moment, Olivia realized something powerful. The world hadn't stopped, and maybe she didn't have to either. Later that afternoon, She walked to the bookstore near her house. Her daughter loved stories, and for weeks Olivia hadn't had the strength to read to her at night. She ran her fingers along the shelves, picked a colorful children's book, and smiled faintly. "Tonight, I'll read to her again," she promised herself. As she walked home, clutching the book in her arms, Olivia thought of the delivery boy once more. That simple, effortless smile had been the push she didn't know she needed. It hadn't solved her pain, but it had given her permission to believe in tomorrow. What Olivia didn't know, however, was that destiny had a way of weaving lives together, and soon her path and Ethan's would cross again, this time in a way neither of them could have imagined. A few days later, Olivia found herself back at the same little coffee shop where she had taken that first brave step. This time, she brought her daughter along. The little girl's laughter filled the space as she pressed her nose against the glass case of pastries, trying to decide between a chocolate muffin and a cinnamon roll. For Olivia, simply being there, sitting at a table with her daughter, sipping coffee, and not feeling completely suffocated by grief was already a quiet victory. As she helped her daughter pick a treat, a familiar voice broke through the background hum of the cafe. "Hey, it's you." Olivia looked up, startled, and there he was, Ethan, the young delivery boy, standing just a few feet away with his delivery bag slung over his shoulder. His eyes lit up with recognition, that same warm, unshakable smile spreading across his face. For a moment, Olivia froze. She wasn't sure why her heart skipped the way it did. Maybe because she hadn't expected to see him again. Maybe because she remembered the exact night his smile had kept her from sinking deeper into despair. She managed a small, almost shy smile. "Hi," she whispered. Ethan walked closer, hesitant but genuine. "I didn't think I'd run into you again. How are you?" His words carried real concern, not just polite curiosity. Olivia hesitated. She wanted to say she was fine, but the truth was more complicated. Still, she answered softly, "Better, I think. Taking it one day at a time." Her daughter tugged at her sleeve, holding up the chocolate muffin triumphantly. Ethan crouched down to the little girl's level. "Good choice, that's my favorite too," he said with a playful grin, earning a giggle. Something shifted in Olivia's chest. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was deeper than that. It was the realization that this young man, without even knowing it, had been a part of her healing. He had shown her a kindness so small, yet so powerful, that it helped her remember life still had light. They talked for a few minutes, nothing extraordinary, about the weather, about her daughter starting school soon, about how he was juggling work and college classes. But for Olivia, it felt like a bridge being built between her pain and the world she had almost abandoned. As Ethan prepared to leave for his next delivery, he turned back and said something that stayed with her. "You're stronger than you think. Don't forget that." Then, with that same smile, he walked out the door. Olivia sat in silence, holding her daughter's hand, her latte growing cold on the table. For the first time since her husband's passing, she felt a stirring inside her heart. Hope, not the fragile hope of someone pretending everything was okay, but the kind that whispered, maybe tomorrow really can be better. And though she didn't know it yet, that brief encounter was only the beginning of a bond that would soon change both of their lives forever. That night, after running into Ethan at the coffee shop, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about his words. "You're stronger than you think." They echoed in her mind long after she tucked her daughter into bed. For months, she had felt weak, like a shadow of herself. But for some reason, hearing those words from someone who barely knew her gave them more weight. The next afternoon, Olivia decided to take another small step forward. She walked to the park near her house with her daughter, who happily ran toward the swings. Olivia sat on a bench, clutching the children's book she had bought days ago, waiting for the right moment to read it to her little girl. Just as she opened the book, she heard a familiar voice. "Looks like I'm running into you everywhere," Ethan said with a laugh. He was on his bike, delivering an order to a house across the street, and spotted her on the bench. Olivia smiled softly. "Seems like it," she replied, her voice carrying a mix of surprise and comfort. Ethan leaned his bike against the bench and sat down for a few minutes. At first, their conversation was light, about her daughter's favorite stories, about the weather, about how tired he always was from juggling deliveries and night classes. But then, as the moments passed, Olivia felt something shift. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt safe enough to peel back the mask she had been wearing. Her voice trembled as she stared at the ground. "I don't usually talk about this, but I lost my husband last year. Since then, it's been hard. Some days, I can't even get out of bed. Other days, I pretend I'm fine so my daughter doesn't see me breaking." Ethan's smile faded into quiet empathy. He didn't interrupt. didn't try to offer quick fixes, he just listened. His silence felt like permission for her to finally let it out. Olivia continued, tears filling her eyes. That night you delivered food to my door. I was in such a dark place. I don't think you'll ever know how much that one smile meant. It reminded me that maybe life wasn't done with me yet. Her words hit Ethan hard. He blinked, trying to hide the emotion rising in his chest. I didn't know, he said softly. I was just doing my job. Olivia looked at him, her eyes glistening. Maybe, but sometimes the smallest things, the things you don't even realize matter, end up saving someone. For a moment they sat in silence, watching her daughter laugh on the swings. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy, but healing. Ethan finally spoke, his voice steady but gentle. You've been carrying more than anyone should, but the fact that you're here, that you're still trying, that says more about your strength than you realize. Olivia wiped her tears, a faint but genuine smile tugging at her lips. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was drowning when she shared her pain. She felt lighter. As Ethan got up to continue his deliveries, Olivia called out softly, "Thank you for listening." He turned, giving her that same warm smile, the one that started it all, and replied, "Anytime." And as she watched him ride away, Olivia realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't alone. Weeks passed, and little by little, Olivia began to rebuild herself. She was no longer just existing, she was starting to live again. She went on morning walks with her daughter, read bedtime stories every night, and even began sketching again, something she hadn't touched since her husband's passing. Life was far from perfect, but it felt possible. One chilly afternoon, Olivia bundled her daughter in a coat and scarf and decided to take her to the same park where she had spoken to Ethan weeks ago. As they arrived, Olivia noticed something unusual, a small crowd gathering near the fountain. Curious, she walked closer. There, standing with his delivery bag slung across his back, was Ethan. But he wasn't delivering food this time. He was handing out hot cocoa to homeless people sitting by the benches. He wasn't doing it for recognition. No cameras, no announcements, no tips, just quiet kindness. Olivia froze, her heart swelling. She watched as he crouched down to hand a steaming cup to an elderly man, smiling in that same gentle way, the smile that had changed her life. She realized something profound in that moment. Ethan wasn't just kind to her. This was who he was. His small gestures, unnoticed by most, had the power to heal wounds he would never see. Her daughter tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, isn't that your friend?" she asked, pointing at Ethan. Olivia smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, that's him." When Ethan finally looked up and spotted them, his face lit up in surprise. "Olivia, hey!" he called out, jogging over. He looked slightly embarrassed, brushing the cold from his hands. "Guess you caught me in my side mission," he joked. But Olivia didn't laugh. Her eyes softened, her voice breaking as she said, "Do you even realize what you're doing? You saved me with one smile, and now I see you're saving others too. You don't even know the impact you have." Ethan looked at her, stunned, then shook his head humbly. "I'm not saving anyone. I'm just trying to do a little good where I can." Olivia stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. "No, Ethan. You are saving people. You saved me. That night, I don't think you'll ever understand how close I was to giving up, but your smile reminded me that there was still light in this world. And today, watching you here, I know I'm not wrong. That light is you." Tears filled Ethan's eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. He wasn't used to being seen like that, not as just a delivery boy, but as someone who mattered. The wind blew gently through the trees as Olivia's daughter ran ahead, laughing. For the first time since her husband's death, Olivia's heart didn't ache with emptiness. It ached with gratitude. Gratitude for a stranger who became a lifeline, for a smile that became her turning point. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Olivia whispered words she hadn't dared to believe for months. "I think I'm going to be okay." And Ethan, with that same unassuming smile, simply replied, "Yes, you are." What neither of them knew was that this wasn't just the end of a painful chapter. It was the beginning of something new. Something healing, a friendship, a connection, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can rewrite someone's entire story. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can have the biggest impact. A smile, a kind word, or a simple gesture can save someone's life without us even knowing it. Olivia's story reminds us that behind every person we meet, there may be battles we cannot see. And Ethan's smile shows us that we don't need to be rich, powerful, or famous to make a difference. We just need to be human. Never underestimate the power of compassion, because your light might be the only thing keeping someone else from falling into darkness.